Shalom, shalom, welcome. Shalom, shalom, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We know others are trickling in, but we're going to get started. And I see, just so folks know, we are recording and we're going to be live on Facebook any moment as well. Um, so, and others will be trickling in. It's great to see great colleagues and friends here. I also want to give a special shout out to Rabbi Dina Nyman, who is one of our new synagogue partners, the wonderful Kehillah of Riverdale, one of our new synagogue partners. This is actually the first program of our partnership. And the recording of this will be available in a few days as well. If this is the middle of someone's workday and they want to get the recordings after, we'll have it as podcast and as YouTube. So, friends, the format for today is going to be I'm going to ask our teacher five questions, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. But I'm going to prioritize first the questions that are in the chat. So if you want to put questions in the chat, feel free to do that. And then we'll have the chance to unmute folks as well. So just a brief intro. Rabbi Dr. Yitz Greenberg serves as the president of the J.J. Greenberg Institute for the Advancement of Jewish Life, and as senior scholar in residence at Hadar. Rabbi Greenberg was ordained by Beth Joseph Rabbinical Seminary of Brooklyn, New York, and has a PhD in history from Harvard University. He has had a long and notable career in the service of the Jewish people. He served in the rabbinate, notably at the Riverdale Jewish Center in the 1960s. He served as professor and chairman of the Department of Jewish Studies of City College of the City University of New York in the 1970s. Together with Elie Wiesel, he founded Klal, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, and served as its president until 1997. Klal offered pluralistic Jewish learning for Jewish communal leadership and programs of intra-faith dialogue for rabbis of every denominational background. From 1997 to 2008, he served as founding president of Jewish Life Network Steinhardt Foundation, which created such programs as Birthright Israel and the Partnership for Excellence in Jewish Education. Rabbi Greenberg was one of the activists, founders of the student struggle for Soviet Jewry and the movement to liberate Russian Jewry. He was a pioneer in the development of Holocaust education and commemoration. When Elie Wiesel served as chairman of the President's Commission on the Holocaust, Rabbi Greenberg served as its executive director. The commission recommended and drew the blueprint for the creation of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum on the National Mall in Washington. He served as the museum's chairman from 2000 to 2002. He's a leading Jewish thinker and has written extensively on post-Holocaust Jewish religious thought, Jewish-Christian relations, pluralism, and the ethics of Jewish power. In his book, Interpreters of Judaism in the Late 20th Century, Professor Stephen Katz wrote, "No Jewish thinker has had a greater impact on the American Jewish community in the last 2 decades than Irving Greenberg." In his new book, if you don't have it yet, please be sure to pick it up, The Triumph of Life, he argues that the Holocaust and the Jewish assumption of power in creating the state of Israel are the beginning of a new era in Jewish history. Together, these two events usher in a third stage of Jewish religion. Just briefly before we start here, I also just want to acknowledge Rav Yitz has been a great mentor and teacher to me, and I know to many others on the call here as well, and those on the recording side as well. And one partnership that's really meaningful to me today that everyone should know about is that in honor of Rav Yitz's late son, JJ, we have an amazing Torat Chaim JJ Greenberg Award. We give out about 3 a year in Europe, in Israel, and in America to young Jewish leaders emerging out of the modern Orthodox community who we can honor and give a grant to support them. And I fly into these communities as much as possible around the world to strengthen that community, to honor this young leader. And we have a number of major awards coming out announced in the next few months. So with that, Rav Yitz, thank you so much from Yerushalayim joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting us. You left off my bio that I'm one of the leading fans of Shmuel Yanklowitz.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. Okay, so the first question, I'm sorry to start with a heavy topic. It'd be nice to start with something sweet, like what kind of cheesecake are you eating for Shavuos this year? But let's start with some heavy stuff because there's a lot of heavy things going on in the world. What is it currently like in Israel, in Yerushalayim, during this current war with Iran?
Thank you for asking. I think it's essential to at least ask It's very important because when you're living in Arizona, for that matter, New York, or anywhere in America, it's thousands of miles away. And I think, as Rambam points out so importantly, Al Tifrishun at Tzibur, to be identified with the Arevim Zelazah, is really an expression of wherever I am, I feel the challenge, the dangers, the threats, the opportunities that face Jewish people. So American Jews should not be sitting here safely and complacently. American Jews should be feeling, and we're asking, how does it feel to be in Israel? Speaking from my own perspective here, we're in Jerusalem, we live here in Jerusalem now. Again, the truth is, for us, it's been much easier than what a normal war would be. First of all, again, because Israel, amazingly, it's part of its greatness as a country, really has looked out for the life and safety of its people. The combination of Iron Dome, which shoots, and the various anti-missile defenses that shoot them down, and the Mamad, every house built in Israel in the last 20, 30 years, is required to have a room that's reinforced. So if the house is hit, the room will be solid enough to protect the people. And the truth is, there have been very few deaths in this war, 3 weeks, and there have been a limited number of wounded, but the striking statistic is that nobody in the Mamad has been either killed or wounded during this period. So it's uncomfortable, it's disruptive, it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes for us to run to the Mamad, to the safe shelter room a week, a few days, a couple of times a day, maybe a few times a week. But in retrospect, that's not much of a sacrifice. From the Israeli perspective, and that's what I want to stress, it's not just a sacrifice, it's that this war is and was an existential war. Iran is committed to wipe out the state of Israel. Were they to achieve nuclear weapons, were they to achieve interballistic missiles that deliver them, Israel itself would be a danger. So this is not just whatever the conspiracy theorists have tried to say. Very disappointed to see the Democratic Party, of which I was a typical voter, that only 17% of the Democrats think that this war is necessary or justified. I think it's a classic case where if it had not been challenged now, Iran would have gotten the nuclear power, and it would extend it to not only Asia and the Middle East, but to Europe and to America. So I think that it may be less immediately threatening to America, but it's certainly a long-term threat. And the fact that the liberal or the left in America is appeasement-minded, to me, is a tragedy and a great regret. And I hope that they will come to their senses and realize that Israel, and whatever you think about the government, and I'm frankly critical of it, very critical of it, whatever you think of the Israeli government, the bottom line is that this war is justified in its self-defense, and it's a defense against the ultimate threat. But thanks for asking.
You. Thank you, Rav Yitz, for sharing those perspectives. So to move to a different threat to the Jews, aside from war, you've thought about anti-Semitism over the decades. You've thought about Holocaust memory and the rise of Nazi Germany. Today, there is rising anti-Semitism in many parts of the world, whether it's from white nationalists, white supremacists, or the far right, people like the Tucker Carlsons of the world, whether it's from the far left and those who are fervently anti-Zionists, and how that bleeds into anti-Semitism, whether it's from fundamentalist Islamists, whether it's from minority communities who have never met Jews and have, theological assumptions about Jews. How do you think Jewish communities around the world should respond differently now than in the past?
Well, it's a challenge. It's for me, my generation, which of course is an older generation. It's a great disappointment. In the post-war World War II, post-Holocaust, anti-Semitism in the form of the Nazi behavior, the final solution, the murder of 6 million Jews. It was so discredited and so almost toxic that no respectable politician or influencer or social commentator could afford to be identified with it. And I guess in my own way, I hoped and prayed that America would be the first country after in history, because it was pluralist, that anti-Semitism would really fade away. Well, I was wrong. And of course, the resurgence of anti-Semitism, mostly expressed through anti-Zionism, uh, is worldwide, is shocking. It's doubly shocking because it brings with it justification for murder and rape and for violence against Israel, the attempt to wipe out Israel of October 7th, but also around the world against Jews. So it is both shocking and disappointing. But I think, again, it's very important the Jewish people recognizing, remembering Jewish history is not the first time. We have had centuries and millennia of persecution and pariah status and rejection. So I think the first thing is to remember that and that we overcame. Secondly, I think this is the challenge. I think the primary response has to be to build the Jewish character, Jewish identity, Jewish pride, so that the main thing is not to be intimidated and not to be driven away. And again, one is proud and happy to see that many Jews responded to October 7th who were on the margin to come closer. It's also true that the younger generation statistics suggest that there's been a drift away. So I'm not trying to be complacent. But the most important response to anti-Semitism is to build Jewish identity and values so that people will stand and face and confront and say the truth, that it's worth the suffering and the threat for the purpose, for the values, for the good life that one grows from living Jewishly. The third thing is, and nevertheless, I think we should not give it away. We have to compete and confront anti-Semitism. And you correctly pointed out, it's on the right, it's on the left, extreme right, extreme left. And so again, I think Jews have to grow up. The people on the right, Jews have to stop focusing anti-Semitism as if it's only from the woke or from the left. People on the left have to stop focusing just on the right. We have to, in a sense, rise above these lines and say it's a common threat to everybody. The famous line in Rav Soloveitchik, that the covenant of world repair and of human dignity that we are represent. The Torah, he says, has two levels of meaning. One is Brit Goral, to share. If you are in this covenant, you share Jewish history. He made it very specific. You share Jewish history. You say, it's me, not to them, but to me. You share Jewish suffering. When Jews are in danger or hurt, you feel challenged. You are anxious about it. You step up. Shared responsibility and shared action. Those are the 4 steps. Any Jew who experiences, and all Jews should, and every denomination, and this is my argument, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, secular, every denomination, and most of them do, share this common responsibility, common history, suffering, responsibility, and action. They are one, and they have to unite in resisting and fighting anti-Semitism, and they have to recognize what they have in common together and to look out and to learn from each other. The second level, he says, is Brit Yud, the meaning, the values, the ultimate sources of these Jewish values. And again, we have honest arguments, and our spiritual, divinely given Torah is not agreed to by many Jews. So my point is, we have a right to argue, disagree, but we disagree as partners in a covenant. So the third way of responding is all of us in our own area and fields to confront anti-Semitism. People on the liberal left have to confront the left. People on the right have to confront the right. In other words, we have to, and where we have most credible, one of the things I admire about you, Shmuley, and your work has been you've been the most active for social justice and reaching out to the asylum seekers, to the immigrants, to the poor, to the oppressed, discriminated. But you've done that making no question about your commitment to Israel and the Jewish people. That's a very important, it's a Kiddush Hashem. And I say this because there has been a lot of disappointment, including by me, that the groups that we identified with, whether it be Afro-Americans, whether it be gay people, have not been as solid for support of Israel as we think they should be. It's a disappointment, but you can't let disappointment stop you on either side, meaning their obligation as Jews to help the downtrodden. God is close to those who are suffering and oppressed, and we have to imitate God and help them. In the tefillah every morning, I say, no sein lechem l'orevim, God gives bread to the hungry, and God looks out, gives mishpat to ashukim, gives justice to those who are oppressed. We have to imitate that, not be disappointed to give this up. And in the same way, we have to imitate God and affirming the dignity and the value of the Jewish people and of insisting on fighting and upholding at the same time.
Very nice. Thank you. So picking up on that point around disappointment and allyship, let's talk about interfaith relations for a moment. So, one of the things, even at my age, I'm finding more and more difficult is that you've cultivated an ideology, and then you sometimes want to make everything that happens in the news fit into that ideology. And sometimes we have to rethink certain assumptions that we've cultivated intellectually. And that's hard because we have relationships around those assumptions. We've built identities around those assumptions. But I'm trying to stay alive and responsive to new phenomena so that I can rethink things. And I wonder if there's something new, post October 7th and those disappointments you talked about and just other shifts. I mean, Nostra Aetate being at risk, for example, with younger generations of Catholics being in a different place from older generations of Catholics. I wonder, how do you see Jewish Christian and Jewish Muslim relationships evolving in today's tense geopolitical environment? How are you thinking about those two Abrahamic relationships and what might be different now?
Yeah, so again, we have to be alert and watch all these things. We'll come back to it. I hope it's a question of the future and how we build a better future. But to start, the two religions must be separated. Christianity has pulled off, Western Christianity at least, has pulled off one of the greatest repentances and religious self-transformation of all time. In that, because of the Holocaust, because they saw that the years, centuries, millennia of discriminating against Jews had injected this poisonous anti-Semitism into Western culture, Hitler exploited that to identify the Jews as the enemies and to exterminate them. So feeling that guilt and driven by a sense that you couldn't go on the same as in the past, it's not just Nostra Aetate, which is the Catholic statement of the new thinking, beginning of the new thinking toward Jews. It's permeated widely. The American Lutheran Church, named after Martin Luther, repudiated his teachings about the Jews. Again, we would be the Jew and have the courage to repudiate, our major gedolim or major thinkers where they have gone wrong. So it has been a remarkable accomplishment, and Nostra Aetate expresses that, followed up by many other more important developments in terms of affirming the independent dignity of the Jewish religion, that it has never been revoked, contrary to the supersessionist theology that ruled Christianity for 2,000 years, never been superseded. So there was remarkable accomplishment in moving forward. Now the danger is, which you hinted at, partly out of the need to close ranks or to come closer to Muslims. After all, there are Christians throughout the world in Muslim countries and in Muslim majority countries. And the truth is they're suffering. And so the church, there's a lot of pressure in the church to cozy up to Muslims. And some who say, well, the only way to do that is to accept the Muslim anger, disappointment, persecution of Jews and not confront it and not argue with it. So there is a danger of a rollback in the younger generation with more traditionalist reassertion of Catholicism. Some of that traditionalism is spilling over to bring back the good old days of not only the Latin Mass, but of the language of the put down the Jewish people, Jewish religion. So the answer is, in my judgment, we have to continue this active dialogue. For the moment, the top leadership has not betrayed. It has been poor, or as Pope Francis, who was very positive on the Jews, Judaism was very poor in handling the Gaza war. So there is a danger in the top leadership, but out to now it hasn't happened. So I think we just have to keep pushing the dialogue and keep pushing the Christianity to understand that this is a liberating and ennobling development, and they should not back away from it. Muslim is a much more complicated. First of all, again, right now, the truth to tell, throughout the world, jihadi and other extremist forms of Islam are the strongest currents. And the truth is, we will not have peace and a better world until the more moderate or more progressive currents come to the fore. In a way, and the Muslim cultures, such as in Saudi Arabia or United Emirates, have recognized this, and they've begun to invest in the last decade or two in dialogue and trying to develop a more positive relationship to Jews. Because if they can overcome, there is a good deal of anti-Semitism in the Quran, in the Arab culture. So they have to overcome that, and they understand that to do that, they're going to have to develop a more moderate, a more responsible, a more restrained version of Islam. So some of that is happening, and we can help it along by dialogue. However, in my judgment, we haven't put enough energy into this, not enough resources, and as a result, there's bad tendencies in Islam are not checked either by internal development as it should be, or by dialogue. So we have a bigger job to do ahead of us in Islam. And my answer again is, as a Jew, you can't afford to get tired. Rabbi Salanta's famous line, he said, to be a Jewish leader, you have to be, you can't get tired. In other words, you have to accept the fact that the job is never finished, the world is not yet repaired. So we can't get exhausted or tired. He said, you can't expect to finish the job in your own lifetime. That's part of it's part of the covenantal understanding. On the other hand, it's a privilege. So that's to me, that's the judgment right now. And I will only add a footnote because I hope that's the next question, which is that the truth is this dialogue comes in the midst of a situation where around the world, including Israel and including in our own community, religion is in many places playing a negative role. The extremists, the discrimination, the disowning and the disappointment of treatment of non-Jews, non-Christians, non-Muslim is much more prevalent than it should be. So we're going to have to deal with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Friends, I'm going to ask two more questions, and then I'm going to open it up. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll possibly prioritize those, and then we'll hopefully unmute as well. Good to see someone doing that already. All right. So we know how important democracy is for Jews. We know how important democracy is morally. We know how important democracy is for humanity and for global stability. Do you believe that religious traditions are currently strengthening or weakening democratic values? How do you see this playing out in Israel and the US and other countries? And what do you think we should do about that?
Well, that's what I said before, and I think I'm glad you raised the question publicly. The honest answer is right now, and let's get to the point. In Israel right now, which is a democracy, the only real democracy in the Middle East, Israel, the religious party, religious Zionist party, and the Haredim, are really playing a very negative role in terms of democracy. The Haredim are totally undemocratic or anti-democratic. Their leadership is unelected Gedolim. They discriminate openly against women and don't even allow women to run for office. In their Political parties, although the Supreme Court has said that they're not, it's not that every party needs to have women as a fair share in its leadership, they simply flout those laws. So, and they have supported Netanyahu and Levin's disgraceful attempt to destroy the judiciary and stop the checks and balances, which are so important in democracy because they protect the rights of minorities. So the answer is right now, the Religious Zionist Party, by its name, is betraying the tradition of religious Zionism, which was moderate and centrist and brought the whole Jewish people together. So right now, it's playing a very negative role, and those votes are going not only to Smotrich, who is bluntly has wanted to smash the Palestinians, not find any room for them, but rather to, in effect, in the long run, annex them and, if necessary, expel them. Ben-Gvir is worse. Ben-Gvir, as the head of the police, has stood by while there's been an organized crime wave of murders, hasn't done anything about it. The settler violence, it's a minority, but it's a real violence, a real minority of settlers attacking their Arab neighbor, Palestinian neighbors, and driving them out. Violence, burning of property, even one case of murder recently. And they have let them get away with it because of Ben-Gvir's pressure on the police not to enforce. It's terrible. And it's a violation of democracy. The vast majority of Jews and of Israelis want Israel to be Jewish and democratic. This government, in the name of making it more Jewish, which I deny is what they're doing, is really being anti-democratic. And I hope that the elections will change that. And I say we as Jews who loyally support the state of Israel and are worried and protected against its many enemies, which are real. And nevertheless, we have in the Jewish circles particularly to speak up and tell the government it's on the wrong track in these areas. Now, it's not just Judaism in Israel. Again, as I said, jihadi Islam is a very powerful force, the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, again, thank God right now, the leadership of Egypt, the leadership of Saudi Arabia, the United Emirates are trying, they're the ones that have the peace treaty with Israel or Saudi Arabia, moving toward normalization. They're trying to control this, but the jihadi influence is extreme. And the truth is, even in controlling it, the government is allowing or bends or is afraid to use up its credit cards against the popular anti-Semitism. So there's a big job there to be done to rehabilitate Islam. And I say this ironically, the Christians feel guilty for the Shoah. The Islam does not feel guilty, so they're acting very badly, or at least not acting adequately to the challenge. It's very sad to say it that way, in part because Islam was not as influential, but Islam also has a history of persecuting Jews. Islam, in its leadership in World War II, most of the Arab countries were led by leaders who were sympathetic to Nazis and Hitler. The famous or infamous Hajj al-Husseini, the Imam of Jerusalem, moved to Europe, moved to Berlin, did propaganda for Nazis through the war, did his best to help recruit Muslims to serve in the SS, and did his best to encourage Hitler to carry out the murder of Jews. So they have enough guilt if they would face it honestly, but they don't really live up to it or face it. So it's a big job ahead of us, and we're going to have to remain alert. And I have one simple comment to make. Thank God Israel is strong. Thank God that's the main change after the Shoah. The Jewish people took power, both in Israel, mainly in Israel, but also in America in terms of political action. We have to live up to that. That power is what protects us alive as we try through diplomacy and through dialogue and through outreach to create a human friendship basis of our relationship and to bring out their humanitarian qualities. But that's an unfinished job, big job.
Yeah. Thanks, Rav Yitz. There's many people today who are selling light. Everything is good and perfect and wonderful. There's many people who are selling darkness. Everything is broken and irreparable. Your work has often balanced realism about evil with hope. Where do you find grounds for hope today, given all the countless threats we've only touched upon today so far?
Well, of course, part of the answer is you have to listen to the Torah, to the prophets. In other words, our religion, that's one of its greatest qualities, insists that the future is not lower, that humanity is not going from the golden age to the bronze age to the going down. We insist that the last word will go to redemption, to the messianic fulfillment. So part of hope is just to reread the classic Jewish texts and to take them seriously. Again, it is not to deny there are serious problems, but again, to see them as a challenge, as an opportunity, not as a fate that's inescapable. The second source of hope, and maybe the most important, well, source of hope, I shouldn't say that. I'll come back. The most important is the Jewish people. In other words, the truth is historically, it's come through. It's faced persecution. It's faced destruction. The Rav of our salvation pointed out a long time ago, many times the first round was rather poorly done, but after the Churban or after setback, they did better. So the second Beit HaMikdash had a higher level of religious observance and religious uh, faith than the first. And if the first failed, then you might say it was followed by a destruction, exile. So in the same way, in our way, that the Shoah, a low point in Jewish history and a high point of Jewish suffering and pain, and was followed by this incredible outburst of life, recreation of yeshiva. And I mean, I always loved the statistic: 30% of Jewish people got killed in World War II. 80% of the living rabbis, Talmidei Chachamim, scholars of Talmud and so on, were wiped out in the Shoah because most of them lived in Poland and Russia and Ukraine, and 90% of those Jews were wiped out. Yet now there are more people studying yeshiva. We have more full-time Talmud students than ever before in Jewish history. So we respond to death with life, to destruction with rebuilding, and that's, of course, that's a source of hope to me. I believe the Jewish people will rise to this challenge too. And this double challenge, to take power, to defend ourselves, but then to use that power not abusively and to make room for other people's needs and other people's lives, and similarly to exercise the power for life and not for persecution or destruction of others.
Thank you. That's a great segue actually into a question from the great rabbi in Riverdale, Rabbi Dina Nyman, a wonderful partner and moral halachic leader in Riverdale. She thanks you so much for being with us and for teaching us. And she asks, along the lines of recent cases of settler violence, how can we speak to the communities against this horrible actions without people seeing us as anti-Zionist? Not only does it fuel more anti-Semitism, but it fuels hate within our people. As we are before Pesach, how can we call on all the leaders to respond against Smotrich and Ben Gvir and make it clear that this is anti-Jewish? How can we get the government to respond strongly? Also to make it clear that each person is created b'tselem Elokim. Thank you, Rav Dina.
Well, of course, Dina is a living example of how you do this, so I should probably cite her. The end start with, it is difficult. It's a place, right now, rabbis caught between a rock and a hard place, meaning some people who are not necessarily the most extreme object, and the rabbis say anything in this area politically or because it's critical of Israel. So it's a danger, it's a problem. But my answer again is that's what it means to be a spiritual leader of Israel, to stick our neck out. Now, again, I want to stress here, it's nuance. I think we have to give our people credit. They don't have to hear everything simple, black and white, or the false picture that Israel is perfect and that there's nothing to be said to disagree. So you get across the nuance, and I think they can get it, that you can love Israel and support it and recognize that there's a real problem, particularly at this moment. One of the things that you said before, democracy, I'm also a complete believer in democracy. I also felt that was the secret, a secret in our religion had to be helped to grow into a complete affirmation of democracy. What I've been shocked to see in the last decade is both and a democratically chosen coalition leadership in Israel, it's Netanyahu and Ben Smotrich were democratically chosen, can itself be hostile to democracy, willing to cut corners, willing to hurt some of the most important democratic institutions, or give unfair and one-sided support to people, exempting them from the army, giving the Haredim welfare. So I realize democracy is not a guarantee, and in America too, in all candor. I am deeply appreciative of Trump's policies in terms of the Middle East support of Israel and willingness to go to war with Iran. But domestically, I disagree very strongly and humanly very repelled. Nevertheless, my answer is by the nuance, we have to tell people that, and we have to communicate to them. It's in the real world and in democracy, there are the whole periods when the leadership or the policies are not in accord with your best values. You don't give in. That's the power of democracy. You campaign, you put out your objections, and we have to do that as rabbis and as communities. Speak to Israel, particularly good to do though through the Jewish channels, because we know out there are, unfortunately, powerful and millions who seize every criticism of Israel to make a false picture. Israel is not just sometimes too harsh or has violent settlers. It's genocidal. It's apartheid. These are terms that are not critical. These are terms that are meant to delegitimate and to justify the attempt to destroy Israel. So the answer to the rabbi is we have to raise the level of our discourse, and I think our sincerity will get through to our people. That we love Israel, we support it, and even our criticism, we nuance and we say it as much as we can in circles where it will not be used to abuse a broader false picture of Israel. But if you do, I think I would trust that. I think you'll see in the end that people will understand and follow us in this matter. And they'll understand that being loyal to Israel doesn't mean you don't disagree with this policy or that policy along the way.
Thank you so much, Rav Yitz. We have a question from a wonderful rabbi in Miami, Rabbi Fred Klein. He asks, many have argued that idolatry is about control and power. Clearly, the Torah is an extended critique on the dangers of power. We stand at a time of history in which hard power must be used, as you mentioned. However, to what extent do you believe nationalistic notions of religion based upon power has changed the ethos of religion itself within Israel? Has religious Zionism lost its role and is an arm of a form of revisionist Zionism using theological language in some quest for power? I'm saying this knowing your essays on how power can be ennobling.
Yeah, these are really powerful questions and important questions. And to put it simply this way, one of the reasons of anti-Zionism is there has been this disrespect for nationalism and nationhood. And Israel represents the dominant acceptance in Israel of the state. The nation is really the key to our return to history, to our safety, to our lives. So there's a kind of internationalist kind of dismissal of Israel's chauvinism, and it's we don't need a state. Well, maybe you don't need a state, but frankly, to stay alive, Jews do need a state. Not to mention the positive side that this state can be a vehicle, as it is in Israel already, a vehicle of world leadership in health, world leadership in irrigation, and making life easier and better for people around the world, and so on. So part of it is to get a proper appreciation of nationalism. Now, Fred's question is excellent because it points out that we have this other danger right before us. People who turn the religion into a nationalist front, or it takes nationalism and gives it extra threat, extra power, extra absolutism by ringing it with power, with religious meaning. So again, the answer is it's under God, and that's one of the great Jewish teachings. Torah is not God. The Torah is not identified with any religious establishment. God is not controllable. God is a relativist, meaning he makes human claims relative. and we have to preserve and protect the Torah being above politics, which doesn't mean that it doesn't step in here on the left and here on the right and here in the center. It just means you can't say the whole Torah is only on the right side or only on the left side and so on. So this is again a nuancing challenge for all of us. But I think we're up to it. I mean, now we see we don't have full control, and yes, in the Ben Gvir types, in the Haredi voters, you see the identification of religion with uncontrolled power, while the religion becomes the cover for persecuting our power, Arabs and Palestinians, or taking valid anger and criticism of Arabs and turning it into unjustified, illegal violence. So we have to work on both sides. And I think part of reestablishing religious Zionism's credibility is that it do both, is that it tried to reaffirm the Torah's values of return to Israel and importance of nationhood, and at the same time reaffirm the Torah's values of that nationhood should not be worshipped as idolatry, that political leadership should not be given absolute authority, they should be held accountable morally and ethically.
Okay, so beautiful. So we have one more question from the chat, and then we'll go to folks who want to unmute. I see Rav Chaim has a question. Raphael Cantor asks, how concerned are you at the move to criminalize liberal Jews praying at the Western Wall and the existential threat expressed in the Haredi community's anti-Zionism? Is it a covenant break? And I'll just add to his important question also. I read yesterday, and I haven't verified this, but I read that in the last 9 months, 10 city rabbi positions have been filled, and 9 of those 10 city rabbi positions were filled by Shas rabbis. So we sometimes think of Haredim over there and Dati Lumi over here, but if you look at Shas kind of infiltration into city rabbi, authority positions, there's another element to that. So again, his question is about the Kotel and also about the Haredi anti-Zionism.
Well, the law to criminalize, in effect, women of the wall and other non-Orthodox groups that want to pray is a disgrace. It's anti-democratic. It's violation of the dignity and the rights of Jews, and particularly non-Israeli Jews who where Reform and conservative are stronger than they are in Israel. And I'm sorry, it's part of the sadness that we have a job to do to teach the observant Orthodox Jews of Israel that they should be pluralist, that they should be on guard to make sure that the respect and establishment of Torah, which is a great accomplishment in Israel, is not turned and abused into this narrow sectarian Haredi dominance. Unfortunately, Haredim have successfully taken over the rabbinate, and the victims of this takeover, among others, are the Agunot, because the rabbinate has been frankly sexist and favoring the extortionist husbands over the exploited women. So we're paying a heavy price. That's just one example of the heavy price we're paying. And the part of the betrayal of religious Zionism is that they're helping to push through a law that will continue the exemption for thousands, tens of thousands of Haredi men, and continue the welfare, the support of people supposedly learning yeshivas. Many of them are not learning and not in yeshivas, but they're paid and they're registered in yeshiva. So we have a major job to do there to change the political. But I will say, in my judgment, that's very likely to happen in the next election, namely that the present scoundrels will be thrown out. And that means that the Haredim will be outsiders in the next government. Again, they're not the devil, but they need to be seriously politically, economically checked. Right now, they've developed a parasitic approach to the rest of the country, and it won't take responsibility with the manpower, which is desperately needed for the Tzahal, for the Israeli army. So they're going to have to be checked. What's gone wrong there is that since 1977, when they admitted to the government, in a democratization, when Begin and the non-socialist left came to power, but Netanyahu particularly has given them every request, and they've become abusive in their requests. And instead of balancing that, the Supreme Court has tried to do a little of that. They have continued to feed them. I think they have run out the string, and I believe that the new majority, the new government, will in fact not include Haredim and will put limits. And certainly one of the limits, I hope, will be to come back to the wall. That the wall is not and should not be run, which it is now, as a kind of a Haredi shtibel. It's a national historical site, not just a prayer place. And this historical site belongs to the whole Jewish people. And this historical site excites the whole Jewish people. And yes, there are Jewish people who would like to pray at that site in dignity. They have refused to fix up the compromise that Latin Sharansky developed to fix up this area near Robinson's Arch, which is not the main Kotel, but it's close, and it's part of the Kotel, an extension of the Kotel. They have not fulfilled that promise or that proposal. So we, as religious, observant, fully Orthodox Jews, should be speaking up more and pushing to stop this abuse. But again, it's part of not just freeing up the wall and ending the Haredi dominance of the rabbinate. It means just that religion in general begin to play a more bridging, a more respectful, a more centrist, more moderate role in Israel than it's playing right now.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Cantor, for joining and for your important question. I really appreciate it. Okay, Rav Chaim, you want to unmute and ask your question? Nice to see you.
Yes.
Hi, Rav Chaim. A wonderful rabbi in LA, Rav Chaim. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining.
Good to be here and good to hear you, Rabbi Yitz. It's hard for me to proceed with my question, partly out of the enormous respect I have for all that you've done. It's not empty. I worry. In other words, you present the case that Israel is being besmirched and that Israel is existentially threatened, and that therefore X and X need to be our position to defend Israel. What if you feel that Israel's on the road to self-destruction, and all the things that you are defending, not all, but many of them, are actually factors in that self-destruction, and that it's not simply seeing it as the left is a mistake, because there's more and more widespread, there's more and more disenchantment with Israel. I mean, this is what concerns me. People are giving up. Religious Jews are giving up on the future of Israel because of its behavior. You said something in passing here. You mentioned the accusations of apartheid. It's not just an accusation. I'm sure you're familiar with all the literature. For instance, you know that Benjamin Pogrund, for example, who was a main defender of Israel, a South African journalist who fought against apartheid, and for years defended Israel in international fora against the accusation, the false accusation, finally said this year, it's apartheid. Now, we don't say this. We say instead, there are bad things happening. We have to fight against the bad things. But, this is called, what is it called? Yorel Bocher. When is it time to stop crying and doing and saying there's something fundamentally sick in the enterprise, in religious Zionism itself? It's not just Ben Gvir and Smotrich. You know that 50% of religious Zionist youth said that they hate Arabs and that Arab voting rights should be revoked. It was published in the Times of Israel and the Jerusalem Post. It wasn't just Haaretz. There's a sickness in our community. What are we doing about that to uproot that dimension instead of constantly falling back on the sense that we are committed to morality? And I don't want to overdo this. I feel this in my heart that we are culpable in standing by and watching the state of Israel on a road of self-destruction, including, by the way, this great existential war that we're fighting, that we hear now isn't going to achieve its goals, is going to leave Iran intact, like Gaza has been left intact. Look what wars have accomplished, supposedly just wars. They've taken us back to the places we were beforehand, and maybe even worse off than we've been. And that's because we've been willing to add our voices in support of existential wars. Maybe
Well,
existential wars are bad.
so my
Maybe.
answer is, Chaim and I speak with tremendous respect for him, and he's been an incredible Hillel director and an incredible voice for moral and for religious upstanding, and including the rights of Palestinians and the rights of the underprivileged and the persecuted. So what I say is respectful, even though it's a sharp disagreement. First of all, it's not the road self-destruction. What you're talking about is you believe it's losing the support because of its bad behavior, but then it will be destroyed not by Smotrich, but by Iranians or whoever it is that are trying to carry it out. So again, I agree that not all wars are successful, and I regret that. I also agree that in wars, innocent people, civilians get killed, and that's very upsetting, very difficult. But the alternative not to go to war is to drop dead or to be killed.
Yes,
And
yes, but you didn't say, but
in all due respect, therefore, I think, again, let me say one more qualification so you won't take it personally as a rejection, simply rejection. The truth is, we disagree on the extent of how badly Israel is behaving as compared to how good it is. All democracies have serious flaws, and Israel is a human, flawed democracy. But you know what? We differ on this and the extent, and I believe that all these flaws do not change the basic dominant truth that it's a vital, alive country, that Arabs in Israel, who are not fully equal, are treated better than anywhere else in the world, in the Arab world.
Yes, they don't want to leave Israel. You're right. They don't want to leave Israel. Okay.
Not just they don't want to live, they are treated better. And that the Christian community of Israel is the only Christian community in the Middle East that's growing, because in the other countries where the Arabs are dominant, they are persecuted and they are pushed around, and so again, they are not fully equal, but they have come a long way from the beginning of the state. And I believe, as Martin Luther King believed about this country, that it wasn't equal, but it could and it would become someday. And I have to fight for that. And I believe that's what's going to happen. So again, I come back to words like apartheid. Again, it's pure propaganda. I would use a more vile language, but I'm a rabbi and it would shock you, so I don't want to say it. But that language is a good example. Yes, the Palestinians on the West Bank under Israeli control do not have equal access and have roads and so on. So that gives a faint color to the claim of apartheid. But if you live through apartheid, it's an insult to talk that language. Apartheid, systematically, they were denied education. Systematically, they were first put in jail. Systematically, they were degraded. Their pay was not equal there, and so on. So the use of language of apartheid, therefore, to put it bluntly, if it would be a poetic, brief comment, it's one thing. Here, it's a systematic policy designed to put Israel beyond the pale, so then it could be destroyed. So I have to say, with all due respect, our moral fighting for a better Israel, which we should do, we had to be very careful that we did not, in fact, in the end, justify or play into the hands of those who are trying to put Israel beyond the pale. And again, Tucker Carlson said, it's the ugliest country in the world. Not China, which is literally committing cultural genocide against the Uyghurs. Not Russia, which has invaded Ukraine and killing civilians recklessly and heedlessly, and so on. They're not the ugliest countries. Israel is. So we have to, we're going to have to live with two pockets. And Chaim, I don't think you have two pockets right now. The only thing I can say justifiably is that I think it's good that we differ, because that way, between the spectrum of the voice of conscience, balanced by legitimate defense of Israel, we won't overdo the denial and the delegitimation, and on the other hand, we'll be more sensitive So I hope that your pressure will make us all more sensitive and will all feed back more to the Israeli government, Israeli people about the abuses and stopping them. On the other hand, I think uncontrolled or a little bit past where you are, it turns into denial of Israel and collaboration. That's the word I would use with attempted genocide. So we'll have to live with this tension between us. But I will say again, I try my best to combine the defense of Israel with the criticism and with the inner push to stop the abuses and to restore and expand the democracy. Maybe I don't make it enough, so I'm happy. I sleep better at night knowing that Chaim Seidler-Feller and people like him are trying to push further than I'm willing to push. But I think if they would be dominant, it would be bad for Israel,
Thank
bad
you.
for the world. So
Can
we'll
I
have
just say
to live
something?
in.
Shmuley, I just want
Okay.
to say,
Yeah, Rav
but
Chaim,
Yitz,
quick, because we have to end
very
just a
quick.
moment. So yeah.
I think it's a mistake to say to me that I don't have two pockets. I have two pockets. That's the nature of respect that we have to have for one another. I'm respecting you in the sense that I think you're wrong. And I think that you've actually misled people because of your embrace of power as a value in the way that you've done. It's a longer discussion, but I respect you. When you say to me, I don't have two pockets, that's a sense of saying I'm not with the program. That's the whole argument. I'm with the program, like you're with the program. And I think that the program is on a very bad road. You think it's a bad road, but it can be repaired. I think that the repair is there's a much more essential repair that needs to be done, and an investigation, and it requires more boldness than I think that we've been willing, and more of a chance. And simply embracing the accusation of apartheid is not a betrayal of Israel. It may be a way of improving Israel. That's the problem. That's part of the
Well,
discussion.
but in Israel, the Arabs are doing far better than the word
Of
apartheid is a
course,
joke.
of course,
And in
you're
the
right.
West Bank, on the
Yes,
West
Okay.
Bank, they're
All right.
being
All right. All
persecuted.
right. Let's give Rav Yitz the last minute to conclude, and then
No,
we'll wrap up
on the
here.
West
Thank you.
Bank, to put it very simply, I am a supporter of two-state solution. There was a time when 80% of Israelis supported two-state solution, but they generated Hamas. They have had a low-level terrorism, corruption in the Palestinian Authority. The truth is, they were offered a state in 2000 and in 2008 and turned it down because they were more focused on destroying Israel than building a Palestinian state. And even at this moment, if they built a decent functioning authority with economy and decent living conditions and a freedom of press and so on, the Israelis would be willing to trust. Right now, 20%, it's down to that number, of Israelis are willing to consider a second state because they don't trust that the Arabs would use that state, the Palestinians. They would use it again to destroy Israel or be taken over by those. So that's my honest, painful thing. When I said Chaim doesn't have two pockets, it doesn't mean that he has no value in what he's saying. What I'm saying is the two pockets, the one pocket says that we are supporters of Israel and we're out to protect it, its legitimacy, its right to exist, its right to flourish. And in the other pocket, we are critical of its flaws and demand improvement, and we're very much aware of its flaws and of its weaknesses, and particularly of the religious community. Now, Chaim, one last comment. I also feel with the religious community, but that's you and me. That's my failure. In other words, I am a minority. I am a marginalized person. I'm not the head of because the religious community has moved this extreme way. And yes, a lot of the young people, and again, I've talked to my grandchildren and others about this. Part of it is bluntly because of what Hamas did and what Hamas wants to do. Part of it is they're going to have to fight and put their lives on the line. And their friends have died and their friends have been wounded and lives shattered in this fight against Arabs. It's very hard to ask people to separate that in a fine way and recognize the other Arabs are not that way. So I'm not justifying it, but I'm explaining how it developed. So my answer again is, as rabbis, as Orthodox rabbis, as modern Orthodox religious Zionist rabbis, we have to step up and confront and argue. I just this week received a note, not a note, it's a statement from Rabbi Malak Gilboa, Rabbi Huda Gilad. Again, he's one of the greats, and he's been all along. But again, it's a very strong statement about settler violence he went and visited one of the communities, and they had practiced property destruction, sexual abuse. They tied up Arab men, tied them down, and then literally put ropes around
By
their
their
genitals
genitals.
and so on. I mean, it's a disgrace. It's beyond a disgrace. It's cruelty. It's this treatment of Tzelem Elokim in a violent, humiliating way. It's the equivalent. If the Gemara says that Lashon Hara is like murder, what is it like to literally do these kinds of acts? So the answer is they're murderers. So again, I'm shocked and I'm shamed, and I want to speak up about it. But to make this in a way that makes it sound like all of Israel is practicing this is, again, irresponsible and untrue. So we have to all wrestle with these questions. It's I look back. I discovered in the last 10 years, seeing Netanyahu in action and Smotrich and so on, in the last 10 years, seeing Trump in action, that democracy is not a guarantee. There can be whole periods. I still believe in the end the good guys will win, but there can be years when the wrong guys are in power, and they will use that power to put through laws and put through policies that are unfair to the poor and that will favor the rich and that abuse people and cut off people who need desperately medical help and so on. So, but that's the price you pay for being in a democracy.
I'm sorry to have to stop the conversation here, but I know there's other people with questions and comments. I'm sorry we're not
Sure.
getting to it,
Thank
but
you.
to honor the time, Rav Yitz, thank you for making all this time for us, and we wish you long life and continued strength and blessings. And thank you all for your thoughtful engagement today. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities to come together like this this soon together. Thank you so much. Oh, and there's more comments in the chat. You can read Rav Mel and others here. Thank you so much. Have a great day, great night.